let's get to your questions, which I know there's a whole bunch of good ones. Okay, Coach Scott, age limit to that thinking. My 6 and 8-year-old daughters, we're doing exactly this. We're skipping all the fluff. I'm not teaching them how to shoot a layup in terms of proper footwork. We're just having them shoot around the basket, figure it out, how can they score? And what I've noticed is they're figuring it out on their own. They can go 1 foot, they can go 2 foot. And if they can't figure it out, which they can't sometimes, then I ask them a question and I say, hey, how about if you did 1 foot here? How about if you extended your arm out here? What would the result be? What would the result be? And I would want it to be more in a situation where they become a problem solver and they figure things out. So I honestly don't believe there is an age limit to what I'm teaching. What there is an initial teaching limit. And that's where all of us get bogged down as coaches is, how much do I have to teach them initially before I can incorporate decisions? Do we want the skill to be perfect before we incorporate decisions, whether it's guided decisions or live decisions? This is something that, again, you have to figure out for yourself. For me, I'm okay with the fact that the player will for a long time struggle and not look very good. If you watch my daughter shoot layups, she struggles, she doesn't look very good. If I taught her the exact footwork and told her to do 50 reps of the exact same footwork every day, she would look very good doing a layup. But in my opinion, that doesn't help her long-term connect and transfer what's going to happen for her when she's small and she's trying to shoot a layup, especially early on. So that would be an example. I believe it's not an age limit you should be thinking about. It's an initial learning. However, as I said in the presentation already, if they struggle with it, what do? I go back and I reconnect it. So if she's struggling with something, which I've done, I will go back and say, okay, here's some footwork. And then we'll repeat the footwork in a blocked way to have her understand the footwork. I didn't start with the footwork. I went back to the footwork. That's a reconnection. Okay, you've got to make a layup. Go make a layup. Okay, cool. Now, if she struggles with it, I teach her a layup and I reconnect it. An even better way is, which I feel that every one of us should be doing with our players all the time, is sending them video clips of players doing things that you want them to do. Staring to learn is a Daniel Cole concept. It's not his concept, but it's something he made popular. Stare to learn. There's incredible benefits to someone staring at a video, watching it, and seeing this hard first version of what they're going to try and work on. And I've made videos for my daughters from a really young age where they just get to watch players doing different things, whether it's shooting or layups or different things like that. And they're just on their iPads, and anytime they want, they can watch them. And this is stare to learn. So they get a perspective on these things. Really good question. Coach Doug, would you teach those reconnection drills first day and get to 5-on-5 with those reconnections used when you see breakdowns, or start 5-on-5 and then teach the reconnection drills when you see breakdowns? This may be a little bit of age appropriate. It might not be 5-on-5 is the first thing I want to say. It could be 3-on-3. For coaching prepubescents, then 3-on-3 might have more value to helping connect players to the ideas you're talking about. But let's just say 5-on-5 is a broad term. I would start as much as possible out of 3-on-3, 5-on-5, and then go to the reconnection. Now, again, I might put them in a situation, let's say 5-on-5, pass it to a player. The defender touches their hip, offensive player gets to drive to the basket, and now you're in type of 5-on-4 rotation. Perfect. We'll do that. Maybe 5 for one team, 5 for the next team, and go, okay. And then we go to the reconnections, and now we say, okay, here's what we're trying to develop. Here's how we're going to develop them. Maybe we go to some type of rotation drill. Maybe we go to some type of 2-on-0 penetrate and kick and show the possibilities of the passes, the penetration reactions. But in my opinion, starting from the hole and then going to the breakdown or the reconnections has more perceptual benefit for a player because they understand where they're going. And the other thing it adds a benefit for you, depending on your level as a coach, is it helps you decide what you actually have to teach. Too often we predetermine what players need to learn. We have this practice plan, we have this season plan, and we go in and we predetermine what they need to learn. For me, it's like sometimes I don't know what I'm going to teach in practice until we start practicing. Now, I'll go in, and later in my career, I didn't even really create practice plans as much. I created, okay, I want to work on these situations, and then I could organize the situation, and from that, other things would evolve. And that was my practice plan because we were very specific. Now, that's a college team, but the idea would apply at the younger levels almost more so because you have less time and you've got to get to very specific things that help players be better in games. How do they get out of dead situations? How do we solve that? Those are solutions that help players. How do we handle pressure? The ball handling, the individual component, in my opinion, needs to be something that is player-led, beginning of practice, end of practice, outside of practice, because you don't have enough time to impact it if you practice once or twice a week. So that needs to be something that you create an environment that they understand that if they work on this, they're going to get better. And why should they work on that? And how do you sell parents on the fact that players should work on it? Because you know what? The more skilled players have more fun playing basketball. The more skilled you are, the more fun you have playing basketball because you have more solutions, you have more possibilities. And the players that aren't skilled are less confident and have less possibilities. So that would be a big thing for it. So Coach Michael, yeah, I can post a recording of this in Basketball Immersion. I think it's Coach Brennan. What are some good team drills for shooting in terms of connecting, transferring game situations? Seems like there's a balance between reps and game like. Okay, let's start with this. So shooting. Shooting is a good one to be able to talk about. Now, shooting is the one skill that if I am working with a player one-on-one to be able to improve their shot, then that is the one skill that I believe can be isolated and needs to be isolated. Meaning me one-on-one with a player to be able to help them if we're refining a shot, changing a shot, whatever it is. That is not necessary. Well, it's possible as a load and as a progression, but it's not possible early in that process to be able to put them in a game situation. So you can do isolated shooting training. To get mass reps of shooting, I use basketball decision training shooting, BDT. If you go on YouTube, again, tons of videos, free videos of this, but I would just simplify it. If we're doing mass reps, all we're doing is hands out and hands down. For those that know, hands out cues a pass, hands down cues a shot. So we're not working on drive, we're not working on counter, we're not working on penetration reaction. We are just hands up, hands down. So that to me is a massive volume of shots. They have a partner who's an active participant in their learning. We're working on passing. We're still mixing things. So each time they catch the ball, they have to have a bridge. It's not true decision-making because it's not live offense versus defense, but it's a bridge between on-air and decision-making. So BDT shooting, if you're not familiar with that, that would be the way that I would answer that. From a pure in-practice volume perspective, we do a number of things, most of them around 2-on-1, 3-on-2, 4-on-3 shooting, which is these perceptual decision-making drills where the offense has the advantage and we make decisions within that. Now, I can constrain that. Constraint is, again, something I just add to something to be able to shape learning. So the constraint would be no dribbles, no cuts. Everyone's just stand still. If you're open, shoot. If not, make the extra pass. That to me is a shooting drill, and that is a game-like shooting drill. If we want volume, then we can go back to, again, BDT, hands up, hands down, or 2 balls, 3 shooters, which most of you would know and you may have different names for. But if you go on YouTube on my channel, 2 balls, 3 shooters, it's just a mass volume shooting drill. And to be honest, the main part about it is players are variable in their spots and in their positions. So it makes it a little bit more random than just stand still, catch and shoot shots. I can do a whole thing on shooting if you want. Coach John, practice during the season is for 5-on-5, 2-on-1, 1-on-1. Primarily, I would say. Again, I'm not saying don't do on air, but use the on air as reconnections. So I would teach a play, for example, 5-on-5. Slow learning 5-on-5 is better than fast learning 5-on-0. initial learning, walk through, offense versus defense, okay, semi-live or whatever you want to say, 60% VO2 max. They do it, and then we do 5 reps. And then from there, I can decide, oh, can we go 3 trips now running this? Or do we have to go to 5 on 0? There is incredible value, because I don't want you to misconstrue this. There is incredible value to players being able to memorize a pattern initially. Now, I don't think we need to do as much 5 on 0 as most coaches do, because once it's memorized, it becomes mindless. But memorizing something for a player can allow them to be more creative, because they move beyond that initial thinking about where do I need to be? What do I need to do? And now, because they completely understand the pattern, they can focus more on perceptual demands and decision-making demands. I just wouldn't start the 5 on 0. I would go 5 on 5 and then decide, okay, do they not know the pattern? They don't know the pattern, then we'll do 5 on 0. And then we'll come right back to 5 on 5. Because as I said, I want to follow feedback with action. I want to follow reconnections with action, meaning I want to put them right back in the thing that I'm trying to reconnect. If I go do a reconnection and then we go to something completely different, then they didn't get a chance to follow that reconnection with application. Now, that's early on. That'd be the first part of the season. Later in the season, I would completely mix things constantly, because I want them to be constantly problem solvers. That's later in learning. It's a good question. Okay, Coach Morrison. I want to get to 5 on 5 with constraints as quickly as possible. However, I struggle with making sure my team knows all of the intricate details of the offense and defense. Okay, let's start there. This is a great question and a very common question. How much of the detail do they need to know? That's the question. And you all have to come to a certain comfort with that. How much do they need to know? Because I think we teach too much detail, whereas detail is something that evolves over time. Each day I would come in and I would have a new detail that I could use as a constraint to add to a 5 on 5 situation to be able to shape something. Okay. Like maybe initially we walk through, let's go through ball screen, high ball screen. Maybe initially the first time I teach this play out of spread ball screen, I'll talk about the different possibilities, walk through 5 on 5 slow, offense versus defense, and then switch the offense and the defense. So they would both get this offensive walkthrough. And then we would go live, say 5 on 5, semi-live, I should say, 5 on 5 in the half court, 5 for this one team, 5 for the next team. And then again, we could go live full court. Or I could go to one of those ball screen reads and just say, listen, we're going to go 3 trips, but our first trip here in the half court is 5 on 5 versus the hedge. 5 on 5 versus the hedge. And now we're going to use that time in the half court to focus more or less on blocking this one situation of working on it. But the other 2 trips, we're going to go live. And then we're going to have the blend of being able to figure out this one concept that they're struggling with, or this one constraint I'm introducing, or this one detail I'm introducing. And then we're still going to get the possibility of being able to play and figure out things in the full court. The other part of that is that as a coach, this is two-way teaching. I believe it speeds up your offensive and defensive learning, even though it'll look messy and it'll be a struggle early on. It speeds it up because you're connecting offense and defense all at the same time. When I teach offense, I teach defense. When I teach defense, I teach offense. I'm not going to teach them as separate components. So in that one situation where I might take 5 minutes to talk and walk them through counters versus hedge defense, I'm going to make sure that I'm coaching the defense at the same time. This is what a good defender does. This is what they would do to get under the screen. This is what off the ball does. And then we talk about how to counter that on offense. And that would happen. Those things would more or less happen again simultaneously in this two-way teaching. Coach, if I missed one of your questions there, just repost it and you can go down again. Just kind of trying to fire through a bunch of these. Uh, uh, Coach Ryan, when you're trying to build a program as a new coach, how do you deal with headache players when when they're your two best players? I mean, this is beyond what we're talking about today, but it's a great question. Look, we've got to get buy-in. We got to get buy-in. We've got to spend time. Many conversations before practice, on the practice court, after practice, texts, whatever, I don't know what level they are, what you're allowed to do in terms of texting or emails or stuff like that. But I want to constantly reinforce what we're doing and why we're doing it. And to make, just like I would deal with parents, I want to make my best players an ally, because those are the best advocates for what you're going to do. If your best players are buying in, then everything else becomes easier. Same with parents. I want to put parents on my team. The difficult parent, the parent that's a pain in the butt, I want to find a role for them somehow that they feel a part of it, because often that's what they want. And as you know with parents, and as you know with headache players, at some point, if they're not buying in, you've got to make the hard decisions. But you cannot avoid the direct, hard conversations. Michael Lombardi said this on the podcast with him. He said one of Belichick's strengths is he has every hard conversation. And there's no change without awareness. So anyone that you need to help change their behavior, you need to have the hard conversation. You need to tell them, be direct. Hey, listen, here's why I need you to change your behavior. It's better for you. It's better for us. And go from there. That's obviously, again, great depth to that potentially question. Coach John, throw the kids in the deep end of the pool, then break down. Yes, awesome. Deep end is a great analogy. As long as it's safe, which for most part, what we're doing in basketball, it's safe. We can throw them in the deep end and have them try and figure it out. And then if they can't figure it out, which they won't, by and large, they won't, they need your guidance, they need your support, they need your constraints, they need your situational drills, they need your reconnections, then you do that. But then they at least have this initial representation of what perceptually it means in terms of what you're putting them in. When you're trying to, we're just going down here. What are some of your best ways to teach communication with a team? Like everything, what you emphasize is what you get. So if communication is extremely important to you, then we need to emphasize it. We need to coach it. And here's the thing. I find the behaviors that I want, my non-negotiables, that are going to be me constantly stopping practice, hold, recreate, asking a question or pointing out something and saying, okay, what could we have done better here? What could we have done to help this situation? What were we not doing? You have to bring attention every time someone's not doing one of your non-negotiables. Stop practice every time someone's not. If you want them to talk, stop practice every time they're not talking. Now, the flip side of that is reward it. We talked about rewards a little bit when we talked about reinforcement rewards. Notice it. Notice when they're talking. Notice the player who's talking. Reinforce that. Talk about why it was important. Billy did a great job talking here. And you know what? That helped, Johnny be able to recover on defense. You have to notice and reinforce it. Notice and reinforce it. Those type of things. I don't think any player inherently is not trying to talk. Just sometimes they don't know what to say. So make it very clear exactly what words they should say. And then reinforce the why. Reinforce the why. And that's a huge part of this process. Okay, if a player messes up a drill in youth age group, how much patience do you have until you give discipline or just hope? Well, so Coach Dave, it's a great question. The question is, what are they messing up? Like, what are they messing up? Because that's the thing. What is messing up in your world? Do they have to do it exactly the way you said to do it? Or do they have to come up with a solution that makes sense? If we have these really defined, it must be done this way, your non-negotiables, then as I just said, you got to coach it. You got to coach it. You got to stop and you got to go. I think the discipline component is overrated. If I went back to coaching, I would really try hard to never reinforce or to add a consequence, that's a discipline, a punishment. What I would try and do is to connect it even more to saying, hey, listen, if we're not doing things right, you're not improving and it's not helping our team win. We're not improving and it's not helping our team win. That's the consequence of not doing things right. So we've got to reinforce the why. Why does this matter? Because it's helping you get better. Oh, hey, Billy, why do you want to get better? Well, I want to play more. Well, here's your time. This helps you get better. And then the second part about obviously your team win. So I would, as much as possible with young players, I would coach it constantly. I'm a stopper. I stop everything, especially early in the year. And people that have come and seen my practices or have seen on Basketball Immersion a little bit, you've seen it. Stop, hold, recreate. Okay, teach, short bursts of information, keep going. We don't let them keep making mistakes. We don't not coach them. When we play 5-on-5, we stop it all the time. And that's my thing. I don't have a problem stopping it, but I just want you to be sure why you're stopping it and how important is that stop. And then as the year goes on, I will literally, when I'll stop it sometimes, I'll say, hey, what was your thought process? What was your thought process here, Billy? And he tells me something, oh, you're thinking this. I go, that was great. Great possibility. Okay, you didn't complete it because you didn't do this, or this maybe, but that was your possibility. One challenge I have is teaching in a noisy gym. Okay, how do you stop and teach your team spot zero? Okay, noisy gym. So I coached for years, 14 years in a field house. So I completely understand this. We had track and field running around. We had volleyball on one side of a curtain and we had basketball on the other side of the curtain. But even in summer camps, apply the same thing. And that is when we hold, instead, sometimes I can't have the communication throughout the gym because it's too loud. Then I have to have them, okay, hold here. And I would never yell in the gym. I would always bring them in. Quick burst of information and then go back. Now, don't bring them into you. Bring them into the spot that you want to teach from. Okay, we screwed up a wing ball screen defensive rotation. Hold. Everyone over here on the wing, huddle around, coach, talk about it, teach it, recreate, get right back into that situation. It's not ideal. It does cost you some time on task, but it is your reality and you have to do your best within your reality. And it's a challenge. There's no question it's a challenge. But even if I was pissed at my players, I would try later in my career to not yell at them throughout the gym as much as just bring them in, be really pissed in front of them in a non-embarrassing way in front of other people, and then let them get back out and go again. If you were modeling this, live play, coach intervention feedback, if needed, reconnection, that means if needed, we go to a drill that reconnects it, application, return to play. Again, say we're defending and we're defending really poorly because we're not closing out the way that you've taught. Then I'll say, okay, hold, everyone, 4 spots on the baseline, 4 offensive players, on air, 1-on-1 guided closeouts. Go, boom, boom, boom. We do it for 2-3 minutes. Okay, and I stop, I hold, I recreate, and I'll teach, and then we'll go right back to playing. Say it's a 4-on-4 cutthroat drill. We'll go right back to playing 4-on-4 cutthroat. Follow feedback with action. Follow feedback with action. You said you were a stopper. What do you say about stopping play with an 8th grade team that is not totally confident in their play to begin with, and those stoppages causing the players more anxiety? Okay, number one, the number one thing you have to communicate before the start of the season, before every practice, reemphasize every practice, is safety. I will say this at the start of every summer camp, constantly throughout practice. This is a safe environment. I'll just say it, this is a safe environment. You can make mistakes. Mistakes are necessary for learning. I need to stop it to correct. Correction is not negative. Correction helps you improve and helps our team win. And constantly connect it back to why you're stopping it. I'm stopping it not because I'm here to tell you you're terrible. I'm not telling you you're wrong. I'm telling you that you're not seeing a possibility or you're not improving at something that we feel like you should improve at, whether it's as a group or as a team. Individual conversations are also a part of that, these mini conversations. Hey, I stopped you a lot, in that last drill. Here's why, Billy. And that is a little side one-on-one conversation. But stop. So it is a problem. This is not saying it's not, but coaching has become inherently interpreted as negative by players. And that's created a generation of coaches that are afraid to correct players. You get what you accept. I will stop it and I will correct it. I will stop it and I will correct it. And that process is a part of it. And the other negotiation that goes with that is that we would negotiate this. I would say, okay, Billy, do we have sorry, I'm using Billy as a constant example here. I don't even know a Billy, but Billy, here's the deal. Do we have an agreement that I can coach you? They'll all say yes, but then you have to explain to Billy and your team what it means to coach them. Look, this means that I'm going to stop practice while we're playing the game, and I'm going to communicate what we can improve at. And I talked about this in the presentation. Keep and add. Keep this, add this. Don't frame it as this sandwich approach, this good, bad, good. Be very direct. Hey, keep doing this, but let's add this, right? And sometimes it's even more direct. We need to do a better job at this. Be very specific with feedback as well. That's something players have a hard time with, but we have to, again, constantly remind them that we have an agreement. If I start to coach Billy and he turns away, he doesn't make eye contact, or he starts to mutter under his breath or something like that, then I need to reconnect. This is another reconnection. I need to reconnect Billy to why I'm coaching him. Billy, I'm coaching you to help you improve. I'm coaching you to help our team get better. If you don't want that, then we can renegotiate our agreement. And most of that relates to, if you're not going to follow the agreement to be coached, then obviously it's going to impact playing time. It's going to impact all these other things. And I would never get to the point, hopefully, of threats or something like that. Usually kids connect those things. But then also the other part about it is to constantly notice. They may feel this way. They may feel unsafe. Every camp I've ever done, players feel unsafe the first day. They feel like they're doing something wrong because they're making mistakes. They feel like they're doing something wrong when I'm correcting them. But gradually over those 3 days of camp, even with complete strangers, I see them get more comfortable and more confident and more welcoming to feedback, because we notice how that feedback helps them. If you're just giving them coaching interventions without noticing that it's helped them, because as coaches, we're really good at always telling people what they're doing wrong, then you're going to have this anxiety, right? We've got to make sure that we notice that the feedback you're giving them, the coaching interventions you're giving them, is helping them improve. That will help alleviate this stress. And then obviously, safe environment. This is a safe environment. This is a safe environment. How do you ask your players to ask questions? So getting them to ask questions is very difficult. That's even at the collegiate level, that is a challenge, to get them to initiate the conversations. I found, again, I had the benefit of this, and you may not at some of your levels. I had the benefit of doing one-on-one film sessions where I could ask them and say, okay, watch this clip of you doing something. What questions do you have? And I can create this safe environment where they can start to ask questions, and me not being judgmental. That's the idea. Like, I'm not judging them in this. I'm trying to encourage them to ask questions. We know the answer. Hey, does anyone have any questions? You never get any that way usually. Or if you do, it's usually those one or two same people, because they're the ones that are confident and comfortable asking questions. So as you warm up your team to this type of way, what you can do is you can actually now start to, Billy, what questions do you have about hedging on the ball screen? Don't expect an answer right away, and don't be angry if he doesn't ask a question, but I am going to start to put them on the spot gradually. Hey, Billy, what's the answer? Hey, Billy, what questions do you have? I'm going to pause at least 5 seconds. It's going to be uncomfortable. And then if he doesn't have a question, I am then going to turn to someone else and say, okay, who else has a question? Because the thing is, that pause And that process of asking Billy allows everyone else to think. I've said this many times at many clinics. The best teacher I ever had was the one that didn't ask for participation. They just called out names and they asked, Scott, what's the answer? Billy, what's the answer? Ricardo, what's the answer? The best teachers I ever had were the ones that did that, because that put me immediately in a frame of mind where I had to be prepared and I was an active participant in my learning. So that was a big part of it. Does teaching offense and defense at the same time ever lead to Of course it does. Coach Armstrong, great question. Yes, it does. But that's the point. They are overloaded, and then you go back and you can simplify. But starting from overload helps them better connect the perceptual demands. Let's say I'm trying to teach players how to pivot. I can go 1-on-0 pivoting. I can go 2-on-0 pivoting. I can go partner pivoting, team pivoting. I can do all these things. How about if I just put them in a situation, drive to the basket, you're dead, 3-on-3, and now pivot and try and get out of trouble. They're going to screw up. It's going to be overload. But it's cool because in that situation, now they're really connecting. What is the point of all this pivoting? Oh, we got to be better at pivoting. We got to be great at fundamentals. Well, that doesn't mean in a 1-on-0 drill. That means in a game, they've got to know how to use an evasive or attacking pivot to be able to get out of trouble or to create an advantage. That's the whole point. So putting them in that situation, yes, it's overloading, but we're not going to leave them there. We're not leaving them in the deep end and not teaching them how to swim. We're going to put them in the deep end and then save them and progress them so that they know how to swim the next time they jump into the deep end. All of that is relative to your level. Yes, great. I'm glad that you guys are sharing and supporting each other within this as well. That's a huge part, by the way, the basketball immersion community. The part that you don't see if you're not a member is our mastermind community, where coaches, I don't even have to interact much in there anymore. Coaches are supporting each other, because the one thing is that when you go to this type of approach, there's a lot of people that will tell you this is not basketball coaching. And those are people that, in my opinion, are stuck in the past and haven't evolved their philosophy of how the game is played or how the game is taught. And that's the biggest thing. So a lot of support within this conversation right now is wonderful. How about when do we stop practice a lot? How are the players going to get game feel? You know what? Game feel is one of those things. So think about this. What is game feel? They're not getting game feel in 3-man weave. They're not getting game feel in 4-on-0 passing. They're not getting game feel in anything that doesn't involve offense versus defense. So here's my negotiation with players, an explanation of this exact conversation. Look, we're playing 3-on-3, or we're playing 4-on-4, we're playing 5-on-5. And I see it sometimes that they want to play a little bit more. You can sense that. You can feel that. And I'll just remind them, hey, listen, we're not doing drills here. We're playing basketball. What do you like about playing basketball? Playing basketball. So we're playing basketball. But here's the negotiation. For us to improve, I must stop, correct, inform, and again, have us be able to apply the things that we feel are going to help you improve and help our team win, right? And I would argue that my practice, because by and large, they're 5-on-5, 4-on-4, the whole practice, they sweat way more in a practice. And again, I think conditioning is the most overrated things that we talk about as basketball coaches. I mean, how in shape do you have to be to play some of the high school games, some of the AAU games, some of the college games that we play? There's a lot of stoppages in play. There's a lot of different things. And honestly, if you were to choose between developing skill and conditioning, I'll choose skill every time, because that increases a player's enjoyment. It increases their motivation. And then you can send home, like I talked about with, the dribbling drills, send home conditioning drills so they do them in between practices. But if you run a really good games approach practice, they're more than conditioned. And you know what? They're more conditioned in a very specific way, which is relative to the game. Because a lot of conditioning drills we do with players have nothing to do with basketball. Basketball is short bursts. Most possessions, I think at the collegiate level, it comes out to about 9 to 15 seconds of energy expenditure before a stoppage, right? It's not running a marathon. How often, Coach Chris, how often do you stop and give other players a chance to teach and connect other teammates? Brilliant question. I hope all the time. So again, if I know some of you aren't immersion members, but I have so many examples of this on our website where you will hear players on my team coaching. I can say hold, and then as soon as I say hold, recreate, one of my players, say third, fourth year, fifth year player, because I teach all my players every day in practice that I want them to be a coach. I don't care if they coach or not, but I want them to learn the game like a coach because it's going to make them better. Now, I'd love for them all to coach, but I want to develop them as coaches. So I want to encourage them to be able to, again, coach their teammates. Player-led coaching, player-led practices. Again, not realistic early, not realistic for a whole practice usually. However, those moments are more powerful. There's no question. And I can sometimes go just prompt a player and say, listen, I'm going to stop it here. Do you mind talking about this? It doesn't have to be organic. It can be these scripted moments of saying, hey, listen, Billy, I'm going to stop it here. Can you talk about what we should be doing better on this situation? And then doing it that way, making it seem like their idea. So yes, that's a great point, Coach. With BDT training and skills, would there be any change in how you are implementing that in practice between your preseason and the start of your regular season? Yes, 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 yes. Early in the year or the off season, it's more BDT, hands up, hands down, with all the different variations of BDT shooting. But as we get into the season, we would do more 2-on-1, 3-on-2 shooting and less of the hands up, hands down BDT. Maybe depending on if you get practice time on the court for what would be a pre-practice situation or post-practice, our players, when they do free shooting, would do hands up, hands down free shooting. Even if you know a game like Moneyball, Moneyball is like you're shooting, you keep shooting until you miss 2 in a row. And if you miss 2 in a row, your partner then takes over and you say shoot to 50 or something like that. If we're doing something like that, we can do that with hands up, hands down. And you can see partners really try and mess with each other. If they try and go too long, trying to force them too many passes, you can put a constraint on that too. Say, can't make them pass more than 4 times or something. But yeah, it makes it a little bit more realistic, a little bit more game-like. So we would gradually do less BDT shooting throughout the year. But if you're just talking about basketball training, so I would consider my whole practice basketball training. We do that all year. We would do that all year. How do you handle missed layups in practice that lead to missed layups in games? Okay, missed passes, and I'm Coach Tate. I'm extrapolating this. This isn't necessarily what you're saying, but here's what I interpret a lot when I get asked some questions like this. Say we're doing a 3-on-0 full court passing drill and players are dropping passes. Say we're doing on-air layups and players are missing layups. I would argue that they're missing layups not because they're not focused. I'm saying they're missing layups and dropping passes because there's nothing to focus them. There's nothing to focus them. It's mindless. Players are going to screw up mindless drills because they're going to be less engaged. If you put them in that perceptual layup, for example, yes, we want them to make layups. But sometimes missing layups is just as important to leading to making layups because they're figuring out the best solutions. And if it's constantly just on air, on air, on air, then they never have to come up with a solution. So their concentration inevitably is going to drop. The other part that goes with that is if they're missing on air layups or they're shooting layups in practice on air, what happens when we throw them in a game and they have to shoot those layups against defenders who we don't know what they're going to do? It's a completely new perceptual demand, completely new things. So that's the huge part. You got to make layups as game-like as possible, as game-like as possible. Rolling down here. Coach Newton, is there still a way to get it? Yes, those are all available. There's tremendous things on the Best in the West coaching videos. Mike McKay, Alex Sarama, York Michaels, Shawnee Harley did some awesome stuff on small-sided games and getting players to understand learning, and a lot of it is guided and how to load and how to use constraints. definitely some of the best videos I've ever been around. And I was fortunate to be there. So it was a tremendous, tremendous resource for me to stimulate my thinking. Really good stuff in terms of that. Coach Seth, been struggling with connection transfer to having my players understand and apply proper defensive communication. Looks and sounds great. Yeah. But development we feel that leads them to understand their defensive position. Okay. So, bring clarity. So here's an example, and I'm not saying you're doing this either, coach, but a lot of coaches get their players on defense to say ball. My first thing is, if they don't know where the ball is, you've got bigger problems than communication. Get your players to say things on defense that connect what they or their teammate needs to do. So instead of saying ball, we would say base, we would say middle, we would say left, or we would say right, to give our teammates specific information about what's potentially happening. If we're forcing base and we say base, then that alerts our teammates to the ball going baseline. So giving them cues that connect for them is much better than giving them general terms. We wouldn't say help. We would say sight, or we would say middle or base. For example, a player that's got baseline help or players that have got middle help, the baseline help player would be saying base, base, base. The middle player would be saying middle, middle, middle. That alerts the player covering the ball where the ball is going potentially, and then gives them confidence that a teammate's there for them. TJ Saint on his podcast with me talked about adding a name. Billy Base, Billy Base, Billy Base. That gives someone a direct cue to understand that I'm there for you. Billy forced the ball baseline because I'm baseline. I've got your help. I've got your help. So different things like that. Dave Smart talked about that a lot on the podcast as well. I think his language is incredible in terms of that. Early, dead, different types of communications that help players really understand these different things. How do you or did you run your open gyms? Good question. So if you didn't listen to the Jim Crutchfield podcast, this talks about it a lot, how they play pickup in the off season. And when he was saying it, I was like, that's exactly what we do. He did a few extra things that I would adapt from that. But basically it's our players are going to play basketball in the off season, 5-on-5, ton of it. But we're going to set up conditions or constraints that are going to happen. Okay, we're going to really run a lot. We got to run a high ball screen. First possession's got to run a high ball screen, or this team, you got to run wing ball screens. This team's got to run a high ball screen. And then, you're there to be able to observe it. Sometimes you can coach them, sometimes you can't, depending on your rules. But you create this condition where something's got to happen for it to be live. You can create certainly some type of system of points. Say it's 3 points for a layup, 2 points for a 2, 1 point for a pull up, or -1 if you're really emphasizing no pull ups. Something like that. You can create these conditions. Ideally, you're playing with a shot clock. Like if you can somehow organize it, off-season basketball needs a shot clock, because otherwise, again, it can become very, very ISO stand around-ish, because that's the inherent nature of players to a certain extent. But you want them to work on I don't want them to run my offense, but I do want them to work on sequences. Hey, today we're really going to work on up screen, down screen. Anytime you're running up screen, down screen, your team's +5. We're playing to 100. Something like that, where they're trying to get organized and trying to figure things out. And then gradually, again, instead of giving them one thing, give them 3 different things that they can do, because then again, that stimulates their thinking. But listen to the Jim Crutchfield podcast. Just tremendous. How much are you preaching make a decision as they approach the basket? We have the mindset that keeping it increases your points per possession to avoid. Okay, so these are 2-on-1 situations. Brilliant coach. I can't see your name, but look, all advantage situations, I find we overpass. I will stop. If you've seen me, and if not, go look at 3-on-1 transition. I do this on almost every clinic I did this year. And I stop it almost every time to ask players, what's the goal of offense? What's the goal of offense? And I'll post this on Twitter. Look, I get it. The perfect possession that so many people post on Twitter, and I do too, is this 45 passes that leads to an open shot because we force the defense, we dominoes, breaking down, keep it hot, etc. To me, the perfect possession on offense is no passes, score. No passes, score. Isn't that the most effective and the most efficient way to play basketball? So that's our goal. In any advantage situation, 2-on-1, 3-on-2, we want the player with the ball. Once we get in the attack area, that could be hash marks, could be 3-point line, depending on the ages. We want it's 1-on-1 before it's a 2-on-1. It's 1-on-1 before it's a 3-on-2. And that's our phrasing that goes with that. We want to attack to score. What made you leave? What made you leave coaching and go into BDT? A lot of factors in that, coach. Let's say the biggest thing for me to all of this is that I have felt so much value from sharing. And that's the main reason that I have really enjoyed moving into more of a role in terms of sharing the game. I've had great benefit and great connections with so many coaches, and it's just been a wonderful experience for me. Certainly I never went into coaching with the mindset of leaving coaching a team, but I feel like I'm coaching every day because I'm in support of coaches, especially within our membership community, which has been tremendous as well. Which is tremendous as well. And I'm not saying I won't go back to coaching, but certainly in this mindset right now, I have had the incredible advantage of working with NBA coaches, youth coaches, college coaches, pro coaches, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, it's both humbling and gratifying. And, you know, and I'm posting this here, coaches, by the way, for you that are on here. If you're not a member of Basketball Immersion yet, I know these are tough times for people, especially if you're outside of the US and the dollar is different. I know for my Canadian friends, the dollar is different. So the coupon 147 code is still live through the weekend. If you want to get in our membership community, and I'll post it right there, coupon 147. If it doesn't work for some reason, DM me. I've had some other coaches have a hard time with that, but just again, incredibly grateful. Are there other questions, coaches? I'm willing to stay as long as you want in terms of questions about this stuff. I did have someone ask me about doing a very specific shooting one of these to talk about shooting. If you have other ideas of very specific topics, I know behavior change came up on here. I'm happy to do something that, again, adds value and supports your coaching. So we can talk about those things as well. I would very much appreciate it. My Twitter is, and I assume most of you in some way follow it, at B-Ball Immersion. If you can give a shout out to this, that very much helps us continue to grow this mindset of learning and challenging and stimulating our thinking. And as I said, so many of you, just for being on here, congratulations. And thanks for trying to look at the game a little bit differently in terms of that. I'd also love very much to hear your takeaways. So if you want to tweet me, I'd love to hear your takeaways. And if you don't feel comfortable doing it publicly, certainly you can DM me as well. But thank you so much for joining me. And we'll post this. I'll let you know at some point where we'll post this. But my DMs are open as well. So if you got any questions, reach out to me anytime. Thank you, coaches.